In the early decades of the 20th century, amidst the dusty yet promising plains of Oklahoma, a remarkable phenomenon took root. It was a place called Greenwood. To many outsiders, it might have seemed like just another neighborhood on the northern edge of Tulsa. But to the visionary men and women who poured their lives and dreams into its foundation, Greenwood was far more profound. It was a sanctuary, a beacon of hope and achievement. It stood as a living testament to what Black Americans, despite systemic oppression and the pervasive shadow of Jim Crow, could achieve when afforded even a narrow margin of opportunity, a sliver of economic and social autonomy. They called it Black Wall Street, a name that, in its very essence, spoke volumes of its ambition and its reality. Greenwood was not merely a collection of businesses, it was a deeply interconnected community, intricately woven together by shared ambition, a vibrant cultural tapestry, and an unbreakable bond of kinship. It was a place where dreams were nurtured, where enterprise flourished, and where a distinctly Black American identity was celebrated and reinforced. Yet, in the chilling span of a single night and morning, May 31st to June 1st, 1921, that extraordinary promise, that vibrant dream, was brutally snuffed out by an eruption of unbridled hatred. White mobs, their fury incited by a baseless rumor and fueled by decades of ingrained prejudice, descended upon Greenwood with terrifying speed and ferocity. They looted and burned homes and businesses with a destructive intent. They fired indiscriminately on residents desperately trying to flee, turning the streets into a war zone. Unfathomably, airplanes, usually symbols of progress, became instruments of destruction, dropping incendiary devices from the sky onto the very heart of the community. By the time the acrid smoke finally cleared, at least 35 square blocks, once teeming with life and prosperity, lay in smoldering ruins. Hundreds were dead or grievously injured. Thousands were rendered homeless, their lives shattered, their futures uncertain. And for decades, this horrific chapter of American history was systematically suppressed, barely a footnote in the official narratives. It became a buried wound, an unspoken tragedy. This is the story of what was lost, not just property and lives, but a legacy, a dream, a truth. And crucially, it is the story of why we must, with unwavering resolve, remember. The remarkable origins of Greenwood can be traced back to 1906, a pivotal year when O.W. Gurley, a shrewd and visionary Black entrepreneur who had migrated from Arkansas, acquired a significant tract of land, 40 acres, on the northern outskirts of the burgeoning city of Tulsa. Gurley harbored a profound vision: to establish a self-contained, economically independent district where Black people could live, work, shop, and build generational wealth without the constant gnawing fear of the racial violence and discrimination that permeated so much of early 20th century America. He understood that true freedom was inextricably linked to economic power. Gurley was not alone in this ambitious endeavor. He was joined by other pioneering spirits, chief among them J.B. Stratford, a man whose life story itself was a testament to resilience. Stratford, the son of a formerly enslaved man, arrived in Tulsa in 1899, carrying with him a deep conviction that economic independence was not just a path, but the surest path to genuine freedom and self-determination for Black Americans. It was this conviction that spurred him to build the magnificent Stratford Hotel, a truly remarkable achievement for its time. At its completion, it stood as the largest Black-owned hotel in the entire United States, boasting 54 luxurious rooms, modern amenities like hot and cold running water, and a grand banquet hall that became a hub of community life. Over the ensuing 15 years, Greenwood didn't just grow, it flourished with an astonishing vitality. This was not accidental, it was the direct result of a collective effort, a shared vision among its residents. Along Greenwood Avenue, the main artery of this thriving district, Black doctors, lawyers, dentists, tailors, and barbers established their practices, serving a community that valued self-sufficiency and mutual support. This was a place where Black dollars circulated within the Black community, creating a robust internal economy that fostered unprecedented wealth creation. Black newspapers such as the vital Tulsa Star served as indispensable conduits of information, keeping the community informed, connected, and empowered. They provided a voice and a perspective often absent in mainstream publications. By the early 1920s, Greenwood boasted an impressive array of institutions and amenities that rivaled, and in some cases surpassed, those available to white communities in other segregated cities. It had not one but 2 movie theaters, offering entertainment and escape. More than 20 restaurants dotted its streets, serving everything from casual meals to fine dining. It possessed a modern hospital, providing essential healthcare services, a public library for intellectual enrichment, and a robust, self-funded school system, alongside numerous churches that served as vital spiritual and social anchors. Residents owned substantial brick homes, often multi-generational, and drove automobiles, conspicuous symbols of success in an era when such possessions were still rare, especially for Black Americans navigating the pervasive challenges of entrenched segregation. This was not just about material wealth. It was about dignity, self-sufficiency, and the tangible realization of the American dream, crafted by and for Black hands. But while Greenwood thrived, an insidious undercurrent of resentment began to fester among some white Tulsans. They observed this unparalleled Black prosperity with a mixture of disbelief, envy, and a deeply ingrained racial prejudice that could not abide the sight of Black success. It challenged their deeply held, white supremacist worldview. The early 20th century was a period of intense social upheaval and, chillingly, an age of pervasive racial terror across America. The gains made by Black communities like Greenwood were often met with violent backlash. Across the nation, white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan engaged in horrific acts of violence, lynching Black men and women with sickening impunity. These acts were not just random violence. They were calculated acts of terror designed to maintain racial hierarchy and suppress Black aspirations. In Oklahoma, a state still grappling with its frontier identity, the Ku Klux Klan gained alarming new power and visibility. Segregation was not just a societal norm, it was the codified law of the land, dictating every aspect of life from where one could live and work to where one could eat and even be buried. Tulsa, despite its relatively young age as a city, was no exception to these deeply ingrained racial dynamics. White residents, accustomed to their position of unchallenged supremacy, watched Greenwood grow into an economic powerhouse with growing alarm. For some, this undeniable Black success was not simply impressive. It was viewed as a direct affront to the established social order, a challenge to white dominance that they could not tolerate. It ignited a simmering resentment that was ripe for exploitation. Even before the cataclysm of 1921, minor disputes, often rooted in racial slights or economic competition, sometimes spiraled dangerously close to violence. The racial climate was a tinderbox, constantly on edge. White business leaders, acutely threatened by Greenwood's economic prosperity and its self-sufficiency, did not hesitate to voice their animosity, often deriding it as an insolent district, a testament to their deep-seated prejudice and fear. In this highly charged atmosphere of suspicion, envy, and racial animosity, it took only the smallest, most insignificant spark to ignite an inferno that would consume everything in its path. The fateful chain of events began innocently enough on the morning of May 30th, 1921. A 19-year-old black shoe shiner named Dick Rowland, a young man navigating the deeply segregated realities of Tulsa, entered the Drexel building located at 319 South Main Street. He was on his way to the only restroom black workers were permitted to use, a stark reminder of the segregation that permeated daily life. Located on the top floor, the elevator operator that day was Sarah Page, a 17-year-old white woman. To this day, no one knows with absolute certainty what transpired in the confines of that small elevator. Some accounts suggest Rowland simply tripped, perhaps reaching out instinctively to steady himself, brushing against Page's arm in the process. Other narratives suggest they may have known each other, perhaps even as friends or sweethearts, and their interaction was misinterpreted. But one fact remains indisputable. When the elevator doors opened, Sarah Page let out a startled cry. A nearby white clerk, immediately rushing to investigate, demanded to know what was wrong. Rowland, understanding the perilous implications of such an accusation in Jim Crow, Oklahoma, fearing immediate arrest or far worse, a summary lynching, fled the building with desperate urgency. The very next day, the Tulsa Tribune, a prominent local newspaper, seized upon the incident, publishing an incendiary front-page article that would irrevocably alter the course of Tulsa's history. The headline screamed, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in elevator." Beneath that chilling headline, the article transformed rumor into fact, ominously declaring that a lynch mob was already assembling, explicitly calling for the swift and brutal justice of racial violence. This article, a deliberate act of journalistic malice, electrified the city. It played directly into the deepest fears and racial prejudices of many white residents, confirming their existing biases and providing a supposed justification for violence. By late afternoon on May 31st, a dangerous, agitated crowd of angry white men had begun to gather outside the Tulsa County Courthouse, their numbers swelling rapidly. They were there for one purpose. They demanded that Dick Rowland be handed over to them, bypassing any semblance of legal process, intent on enacting their own brutal form of justice. The fuse had been lit.
Did you see this? Oh my goodness.
As the news of the gathering mob and the ominous intentions of the white crowd spread through Greenwood, it ignited a desperate sense of alarm. Many residents of this vibrant community were themselves survivors of racial terror in the Deep South. They carried the indelible scars of past lynchings and understood with chilling clarity precisely what such a mob portended. They knew the history, and they recognized the imminent danger. At approximately 9 p.m., a contingent of about 75 black men, many of them decorated veterans of World War I, gathered. These were men who had bravely fought for America overseas, only to return home to a nation that denied them their basic rights. Now, they prepared to defend their community. They marched with quiet determination to the courthouse, carrying their firearms, not with intent to incite, but with a solemn offer: to protect Dick Rowland and to prevent the burgeoning white mob from enacting a lynching. The sheriff, demonstrating a grave misjudgment or perhaps complicity, refused their offer of assistance. Crucially, he did not disperse the white crowd, which by this point had swelled to over 1,000 individuals, their aggression palpable, their intent clear. Around 10 p.m., the fragile peace shattered. A white man attempted to disarm a black veteran, trying to grab his rifle. In the ensuing scuffle, a shot was fired. No one knows who fired first or whose gun it was, but the sound was the trigger. Panic erupted, swift and devastating. Within moments, the once quiet streets of Tulsa were consumed by the terrifying cacophony of gunfire. The black defenders, heavily outnumbered and outgunned, were forced to retreat, falling back towards the heart of Greenwood, hoping to regroup and protect their homes. But the white mobs, now fully armed and emboldened by the chaos, pursued them relentlessly, their destructive intentions clear. Looting began almost immediately. Stores, built with years of dedication and sacrifice, were smashed open, their contents plundered. Homes, symbols of black aspiration and stability, were invaded, their sanctity violated. By the cold light of dawn on June 1st, a new, horrifying strategy emerged. Fires were systematically set, block by agonizing block, turning Greenwood into a raging inferno. Eyewitnesses, their testimonies chillingly consistent, reported seeing small planes circling overhead. These were not observation planes. They were instruments of destruction, dropping burning turpentine balls and other incendiary devices onto buildings, deliberately fanning the flames and ensuring widespread devastation. On the ground, the brutality continued. Machine guns were mounted on trucks, spraying bullets indiscriminately into homes and fleeing crowds, turning residential streets into killing fields. Thousands of black families, their lives abruptly uprooted, fled into the surrounding countryside, into the fields and forests, with nothing but the clothes on their backs, leaving behind everything they had painstakingly built. Their homes, their businesses, their entire community was being obliterated behind them. By 11 a.m. on June 1st, the National Guard finally arrived. But their mission was not to protect Greenwood from the white mob. Instead, they actively participated in the suppression of the black community. They arrested and detained black residents, forcing them into internment camps established around the city, effectively imprisoning the victims while the perpetrators roamed free. The massacre, an act of unconscionable racial violence, finally ended just after noon on June 1st. Greenwood, once the most prosperous and vibrant black community in America, a shining example of black self-determination, lay in smoldering ruins. The air itself was thick with the stench of ash and destruction, a brutal epitaph to a dream violently extinguished. When the acrid smoke finally lifted, the true scale of the devastation became horrifyingly clear. The exact number of casualties remains debated to this day, a testament to the chaos and the subsequent cover-up. But conservative estimates indicate that as many as 300 black residents had been killed. Many more were injured, some grievously, their wounds a silent testament to the brutality they endured. More than 1,200 homes, each a sanctuary, a repository of memories and aspirations, were utterly destroyed. Dozens of churches, once vibrant centers of faith and community life, schools, the bedrock of future generations, and businesses, the engines of prosperity, had vanished, reduced to indistinguishable rubble. For weeks, some survivors, those who hadn't fled the city, were forced to live in makeshift camps, sleeping on cots behind barbed wire, watched over by armed guards. Ironically, the very authorities who failed to protect them from the mob. Their lives, once so full of promise, were now defined by displacement and the indignity of internment. The economic devastation was staggering. Property damage was estimated at over $1.5 million in 1921 currency, a colossal sum, roughly equivalent to $30 million in today's money. This was not merely property. It was generational wealth, meticulously accumulated over years of arduous labor and strategic investment. But adding insult to profound injury, almost no insurance claims were honored. Policies included insidious clauses explicitly excluding damage from riots, a cynical legal loophole that ensured the victims bore the full financial burden of the destruction inflicted upon them. The city and state governments, instead of offering aid or redress, actively engaged in a systematic cover-up of the atrocity. There was no official government assistance to help rebuild Greenwood. Instead, Tulsa officials swiftly moved to deflect blame, a shameful act of historical revisionism. Police and local newspapers shamelessly blamed the Black community for instigating and escalating the violence, perpetuating a monstrous lie that absolved the white perpetrators and further victimized the survivors. For decades, survivors of the massacre were pressured, both implicitly and explicitly, to remain silent. They lived under the shadow of intimidation, their memories suppressed, their trauma unacknowledged. History textbooks, designed to shape the national narrative, conveniently omitted any mention of Greenwood. Generations of children in Tulsa grew up never knowing that a massacre of this scale had occurred in their own city, in their own backyard. A deliberate erasure of a painful yet crucial chapter of American history. Though the spirit of Black Wall Street was shattered, and Greenwood never fully recovered its pre-massacre economic vibrancy, the resilience of its survivors was a powerful testament to the human spirit. They did what they could, with immense courage and against overwhelming odds, to rebuild their lives and their community. Some opened new businesses, smaller in scale, but imbued with the same entrepreneurial spirit. Others, too haunted by the vivid, traumatic memories, chose to move away, seeking solace and new beginnings elsewhere. But for those who remained, and for their descendants, the trauma and profound loss of Greenwood were carried, generation after generation, a heavy legacy that shaped their lives. It was only in recent decades that serious and concerted efforts began to truly uncover the suppressed truth of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Historians, tenacious researchers, and courageous community leaders, many of them descendants of survivors, tirelessly demanded recognition and justice, refusing to let the story remain buried. In the 1990s, a state commission was finally established to conduct a formal investigation, breaking decades of official silence. Eyewitness testimonies, fragile and precious, were meticulously recorded, preserving the living history of the massacre. And in 2020, a century after the atrocity, researchers confirmed the haunting existence of mass graves, offering irrefutable physical evidence of the lives lost. Today, public memorials stand as solemn testaments, honoring the victims and ensuring their memory will not be forgotten. These physical spaces serve as critical sites of remembrance and education. In 2021, on the solemn centennial of the massacre, President Joe Biden visited Tulsa. A historic moment, marking the first time a sitting U.S. president had formally acknowledged the tragedy on its ground. This visit, while long overdue, symbolized a crucial step towards national reckoning. Yet, the journey towards true justice and healing is far from over. Debates over reparations and restitution continue, as advocates argue that mere acknowledgement, while important, is insufficient without concrete steps to address the enduring economic and psychological damage inflicted upon survivors and their descendants. The survivors and their families, many now elders, still seek a full and meaningful measure of justice for the unimaginable losses they endured. The Tulsa Race Massacre is far more than a mere historical event of destruction. It is a complex and profoundly human story. It is, fundamentally, a story of profound resilience, of families who, against all odds, found the courage and strength to rebuild their lives, brick by arduous brick, hope by tenacious hope. It is a story of elders who, in the face of immense pressure and systemic silence, steadfastly kept the memory alive, passing down the truth when the world, official narratives, and indeed, much of America, desperately wanted to forget. Their quiet acts of defiance ensured the flame of truth never fully extinguished. It is also a searing warning, a stark, undeniable reminder of how unchecked hatred, insidious prejudice, and systemic injustice, if allowed to fester and ignite, can erupt into unimaginable violence, consuming not just property and lives, but the very fabric of a community, and indeed, a nation's soul. And finally, it is a powerful call to action, a summons to learn from this painful past, to remember those who were lost, and to honor their legacy not just with words, but with a renewed commitment to justice and equality for all. Because the only way to truly heal from a buried wound, from a suppressed trauma that continues to echo through generations, is to bring it fully into the light of truth, to face it, together, with courage, honesty, and an unwavering commitment to a more just future. The story of Tulsa is our story, and its lessons must guide us forward.